Doing whatever it takes for our students, this is Education Forum, the podcast. I'm Allison Sillis, the Provincial Community Organizer for OSSTF FASO, and I'm here with President Martha Haradaway, and we're going to talk a little bit about what's at stake ahead of us for bargaining.
Happy to be here, Allison, again.
So last time we talked about the basics of bargaining, what's involved, how it works, but today I really want to dive deeper into the human side of it, our members, and what's at stake for them. So when we're thinking about what's at stake, what is the first image or moment that comes to mind for you?
It's a good question. When I think about what's at stake in this round of bargaining, I don't think about a spreadsheet and I don't think about a budget line. I think about our members. I think about how we're going to fight for them, for their day-to-day reality that they're living in their classrooms and in their home lives. I think about the educational assistant, my friends back at home who are working 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. I think about the classroom teacher who is trying to do the best that they can in an under-resourced, overcrowded classroom, staying up till 10 o'clock at night, doing their marking. I think about the occasional teacher who may not get work the next day or not the next day or if at all that week. I think about, the custodian who doesn't have the resources to be able to clean their schools properly. I think about all of those things, about what's at stake. It's their lived reality in their working lives, in their home lives. And for me, that's what is at stake. The publicly funded education system has been underfunded by $6.3 billion since this government first took office in 2018, and that is their lived reality. And it's the lived reality for our students as well. We know that staffing is absolutely stretched thin. Here in Ontario, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an education worker, the statistics are the same. There aren't enough qualified teachers who want to stay into the profession right now because the working conditions are not sustainable. The Ontario College of Teachers, their statistics show that there are 70,000 qualified teachers in Ontario that are not teaching in the system. And so you have to ask yourself, why is that? People are leaving the profession quicker than they ever did before. Like within their first 5 years, teachers are just leaving the profession altogether because the working conditions are not sustainable. And so, our members are very proud. They'll do whatever it takes for students. They show up every single day. But there's a line, I believe, between dedication and being asked to carry a system that's being underfunded for it.
So let's talk about some of the issues that have popped up on our central bargaining survey. And so our members have raised very valid concerns with having to do more with less. So let's talk about that a little bit more. What do you think that this looks like for our members and across our membership?
Sure. I mean, the funding pressures on the board are real. These are not made up statistics. Boards are facing deficits all across the province. And when that happens, boards are forced to cut some positions. And so what that looks like for educational assistants, for child and youth workers, for social workers, psychologists, is that they're having to do more with less because there aren't the same number of positions that were there before. So we have educational assistants doing the job of 2 or 3 people, continually trying to manage, the supports that students need. And they feel like, they're trying their best to make the impossible possible. But at the end of the day, they're feeling like they haven't done enough to be able to support those students. So, understaffing, I think it's a really serious conversation that we need to deal with at the bargaining table. And it's a really serious issue that the government needs to take seriously, because really what is, when you look at what does that mean in schools, it means that there's less supervision, there's less consistency, there's less capacity to prevent crisis. And so it is very, very real issue. And, this government can't continue to ignore it any longer. When they do take the funding out of the system, it does impact the services that are available to students. And so, what does it look like for you in your career as a teacher?
Yeah, I think this became very like normalized for me at this point. But I remember being in various classes and just feeling like a ping pong ball kind of bouncing around the classroom, just because of the different complexities and the needs of my students, and just really having to put that in to make sure that all of my students were getting what they needed, but not feeling like I was able to give all of it just because there wasn't enough time with the number of students that I have. I had been in a class where I had students all afternoon, and I was taking them out into the community, which was an incredible experience to be doing with them. But I was given no additional support. I remember having to literally beg my principals to have an educational assistant to be able to support me and my students when we were going and doing these life skills and out in the community and whatnot. And I don't think it should ever have to be like that, where you have anyone begging for extra support for other students. But it's become, like we said, this normalized for our members, and we know that understaffing is real. But you've talked about this before. Our members are really good at making it work somehow, but they, like you said, they shouldn't have to.
Yeah. And it's true. Like when we bargain for staffing, we're bargaining for the supports for our students. We're bargaining for care, we're bargaining for safety. So when we're asking for more supports, it really is about, providing that additional support that students and teachers and education workers and, quite frankly, publicly funded education need.
Absolutely. Yeah. So bargaining for better staffing is also, like you said, bargaining for better care, for learning, and for safety. And so on the subject of understaffing, I want to talk a little bit about what increased class sizes looks like, not only for our members, but for our students. And so what have you been hearing from members about this?
Well, we're going to talk about de-streaming in the next episode, but the implementation of de-streaming has essentially led to larger class sizes across Ontario. So what we're hearing from members is that not only have class sizes increased, but the complexity of student needs has also increased, and that members just aren't able to provide the individual support that they would like to be able to provide in the classrooms because of the number of students that they have, because of the limited time they have to teach curriculum. And it's not, our members really struggle with this because they really do care. They want the best for students, but what we're seeing right now is a gap between growing complexity and shrinking capacity. And, that's what we're hearing from our members. And I'm sure you have had some examples in your own experience about large class sizes and your experience as a branch president.
Yeah, absolutely. I can think of one of my colleagues in working in the system alt-ed program, and looking after the pandemic, students coming back into the classroom, a lot more needs for students in the alt-ed programs, understandably so, going through like a world pandemic. And my colleague, he ended up having a ballooning class sizes for students coming in, upwards of 40 students in the class. And, this wasn't considered a traditional classroom. These are students that are coming in with a lot more anxiety. A traditional school setting isn't the best for them, and they're coming into these alt-ed programs to be getting one-on-one care, but just the government wasn't providing the funding to be able to have additional supports and staff. And so his class just ballooned, and it was really, really difficult on him. He did his best to make it work. The students loved him, and they were succeeding, but that was
Mm-hmm.
because of the extra effort that he was putting in, and quite frankly probably was tiring himself out every day doing that
I bet
too.
he was, yeah. And when those supports are missing, the strain doesn't vanish, right? People are left to do more with less, and and it really does land in the classroom, and it impacts students' learning conditions as well as our members' working conditions. So that's definitely bargaining is one of the places that we're going to be able to address that. We're going to rebuild. To fight for that ability, that capacity, build that capacity in those classrooms.
Yeah, no, that's it's what we need, right? It needs
Absolutely.
to happen. So we'd love to hear from you via email at podcast@ossstf.ca or in the YouTube comments. But if we win on smaller class sizes, what does that look like for you and your students? And this actually is going to transition us really well into our next topic, which is about student needs. So we know that this has a huge impact on our members, but I want to take a moment to talk about what that looks like for our students. And so, can you think of any stories of a student who clearly needed more support in our education system, and what that felt like for you or from your member that's told you this story?
There is undoubtedly a lack of resources for students, particularly students who require that additional extra support. I think I heard the statistics, 71 out of 72 school boards across Ontario are currently spending more on special education than what the government is funding them for. And there was a report that had just come out, I think it was in the spring of this year, that Community Living had produced. And it was specifically dealing with schools. And in that report, the survey that they had conducted, parents were sharing that out of 1 in 5 students were being asked to stay home because there weren't the supports in the school to be able to provide the supports for their children. And that is just absolutely unacceptable. Parents should not have to keep their children home because there isn't the supports in the classrooms. And so, that's one of the things we're going to be fighting for this round of bargaining is additional educational support staff to be able to meet all of our students' needs.
So we know that supporting each other is a way that we can really win throughout bargaining. And unfortunately, it's been a reality for our members for quite some time that have been faced with workplace violence in our schools and in our work sites. And so I just want to read a statistic to you here. So it's been reported that violent incidences in schools in Ontario have risen by about 77% since the 2018-2019 school year, with more than 4,400 incidents being reported in 2023-2024 school year alone. And let's be real, we know that there's a lot that are also going unreported as well.
Absolutely.
Too. That's a huge number that could be added to this. And so I want to talk a little bit about the ways in which violence is happening in our schools, some of the causes behind it, and what some of the solutions could be as we're going forward.
Sure. And I'll start off by saying, when violence starts to feel normal in a school, it absolutely changes the school's culture. People start to become hyper vigilant. They go into work, is this the day that I'm going to get hurt, and start to question. And that is absolutely unacceptable, and it's not sustainable. Workplace violence, OSSTF, has been advocating for a long time for not only this government, but previous government as well, to do something about workplace violence in Ontario schools. And, there's one easy solution that this government can take. It doesn't require legislation. It requires just a regulation in which the Minister of Labour can introduce an education sector regulation in the Occupational Health and Safety Act that will help one small way to be able for our members to not only report workplace violence, but for the employer to take it seriously and make sure that our members are safe. And so, I've been advocating with the Minister of Education, the Minister of Labor, and saying, this is one thing that you can do right now to be able to address the very real concern that our members are expressing. When I was a local leader 10 years ago, I was still dealing with workplace violence, and it's actually gotten worse. It's got worse, and that's unacceptable in Ontario's education system. And I would say it's no fault of the students. Absolutely not. It's no fault of any education worker, any teacher in the school system. It is the fault of an underfunded public education system where the students are not getting the supports that they need in that moment. And as I talked about earlier, when boards are dealing with deficits and they're trying to find savings, often it is at the expense of the additional supports that our students so desperately need. It's the early intervention supports, from a social worker or a child and youth worker, or perhaps a speech language pathologist. It is the additional supports that are required from an educational assistant. For a student that might need that extra help. It might be, look in the form of, an educational assistance again in a large class size to be able to support teachers. And so these are the consequences of an underfunded public education system. And I would say nobody is to blame except the government, and that they haven't taken the necessary steps to deal with workplace violence. We are going to try to address it at the bargaining table. Again, I don't think that we should have to wait every 2, 3, 4 years whenever bargaining comes to use this as a bargaining item. Like these are supports that students absolutely need right now. And these are supports that workers are crying for and asking. So, I would just want to be really clear with members in that, the statistics that you talked about at the beginning here, those are underreported, and you should be absolutely reporting incidences of workplace violence to your employer to make sure that, the employer is taking the steps necessary to make sure that you are safe at work.
Yeah. And that's all that matters. And like
Absolutely.
you said, and that is going to create a better classroom environment, work environment, not only for our members, but for our students as well, too.
These aren't theoretical issues. These are real issues. These are real students, real members, and dealing with real risk.
Yep, absolutely. So we've talked about safety, student needs, underfunding, class sizes, working conditions. And so what else is at stake during bargaining, and really who stands to benefit from it?
Sure. Students benefit, absolutely, when there are enough adults, enough supports, and enough funding to support learning environments. I would say that our members benefit when they can do their jobs with safety and dignity, and with conditions that certainly don't break them down. And, here's the truth. Like, we are not going to win if we hope that somebody else is going to fix it. We win it through solidarity, and we win it through collective action. OSSTF is doing everything that we can to get the government to the table to be able to address these issues that, quite frankly, need to be dealt with immediately. Recently, we have asked the government to come to the table to start bargaining early. There is an immediacy that we need to deal with in publicly funded education, and we need to be able to do it together. We need to fix the system together, and that's why, I'm calling on our 60,000 members to engage in this campaign, to engage in underfunded.ca, to sign up, and to be prepared to, receive the materials that OSSTF FASO shares with you, and keep yourselves informed all the way along as we walk through this bargaining process.
Absolutely. These have all been really, really important topics that we've been going over today. And I just really want to thank you, Martha, for spending the time with us, going over this and really talking about what's at stake for bargaining.
Well, thank you, Allison. It's been my pleasure.
And so to all of you, if you have any questions, you want anything answered, you have any suggestions for even possible topics that we can be talking about here on the podcast, please email us at podcast@ossstf.ca. And don't forget to tag OSSTF on all of your social media posts as well, too. Thanks so much for being here with us today. See you next time.